Hello again, and thank you for joining Prop Talk, a property management podcast powered by Resman. I'm Elizabeth Francisco, and I am the host of today's episode, The Entrepreneur's Journey. And with me is today's guest, Caren Maio, a Prop Talk founder, inventor, mentor, and someone who's become a good friend. And so Caren is currently the president and chief strategy officer of Moved, a Prop Talk company that takes the stress and anxiety out of moving, if I'm not mistaken.
That's right.
Awesome.
That's right.
It's a new adventure for you. So today we're here because I want to number one, celebrate just an amazing woman in our industry, a very successful tech entrepreneur, most importantly. There's a lot to your story, and I know we have some things in common in our journeys, but I'm just so impressed with everything that you've done. And I think you're such a strong voice. You're so not only entrepreneurial in your mindset, but you're such just a good ambassador for women in technology. And so I am really stoked about this. And I told her, I lied to her. I said we were going to wing it, and then I loaded myself up with questions.
You totally lied to me.
I
You
know I
totally,
did.
I mean, like you're prepped. I'm not. And we're going to see how this goes. But first and foremost, thank you so much for having me. And thank you for the kind words. You know, that means so much to me coming from you. So thrilled to be here.
Well, thank you. And we've supported each other for these several years now. So,
Yes, we have.
So I think a great place for us to start is going to be, tell us a little bit, tell the audience a little bit, just a high level, kind of what your career path has looked like and what you're doing now, what your current role is.
Sure. Yeah. So I joke around that I'm the old lady of PropTech, which is a self-imposed title. So don't feel bad for me, anyone. I know it's funny. It's a little self-deprecating. I like it. It kind of works. But I started my career or my PropTech career about 12 years ago, trying to scratch my own itch. I was a frustrated apartment hunter, didn't come from real estate, didn't come from technology. I was in sales at the time. I worked for News Corp. It's funny because I always knew I wanted to start my own business. And I remember I was in college. I was in the city. I was in New York City. I went to NYU. And I remember I was interning at a publishing house, decided to drop out of school, told mom and dad much later, oh, yeah, by the way, I dropped out. I'm not doing that anymore. They were like, you're not doing what anymore? College. Promptly got my butt back in school, and they said, you will graduate and you will learn on someone else's dime for a while. And if you still have this crazy idea that you want to start your own company, we will emotionally support you. And they were very clear. It was not financial. It was emotional. So I did that. I worked at Nike in their corporate satellite office at the time in New York. And then I joined the Wall Street Journal when they were acquired by News Corp. And, my dad was like, you love talking. Go do something in sales, business development, learn on someone else's dime. So I did that. But I couldn't get this idea out of my head of I wanted to start something. I wanted to build something that didn't exist and bring it into the world. And I loved real estate. I was that weirdo that whenever a friend was like, oh, I've got to apartment hunt, I'd raise my hand and I'll say, I'll help you. Why? It's so painful. And I was just so intrigued by real estate and how it worked. So I tried to kind of teach myself a little bit. And having gone through the process of renting an apartment again and again, I was like, this process just keeps getting worse each and every time I do it. Has to be a better way. So teamed up with some folks, one of whom my co-founder, who's still Funnel's CTO to this day, and we launched Funnel out of my apartment. And it was two of us cranking away, actually three of us, cranking away in my apartment.
So is my perception about New York apartments right? Because now I have this visual of like all three of you in because, my perception of real estate in New York is everything's really small versus everything in Texas where everything is really big. So closed, cramped quarters.
I mean, I want to say 400 square feet of space. So yeah, and everything is like kind of shrunken down to size in New York City, right? You've got your mini dogs, you've got your mini furniture, like everything is a New York apartment size, which is,
oh my gosh,
much smaller than anywhere else and much, much smaller than anything in Texas, I'm sure. So we're cranking away around my coffee table in my living room, and we started to learn more about the industry, right? We initially thought about the pain points that consumers had. If we really want to do something special, we need to think about the industry holistically. And that means talking to the businesses, the folks who own and operate these large-scale apartment communities. We got to spend more time with them. And then that kind of shifted our mindset of, I would talk to anyone who would take a meeting with me. And I started shadowing folks working out of their offices, Every interaction I had, I was like, are there like 3 or 4 people you could introduce me to who are like you or maybe who aren't like you, but who would take a meeting with me, let me ask them questions, do some
Mhm.
basic discovery. And that's sort of where Funnel was born.
Mm.
It was through those conversations where we realized, wow, this process isn't just painful for the consumers, it's painful for businesses.
Mm.
And can we create something special here? Funnel ultimately was designed to create a prospect experience that was designed for both of those constituents.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's interesting when you because you talked already about the you always knew you wanted to start something.
Yeah.
So I'm just curious, is there anything in your in your upbringing that like gave you the confidence to know you could go out and do this? Like what were you doing while you were starting Funnel? Were you working simultaneously? Was it a true leap of faith?
Yeah, it was a true leap of faith. I mean, I couldn't get the idea out of my head when I was working full
Mm.
time. And it was one of those things where every day I wasn't working on Funnel hurt.
Mm.
And I tell founders that all the time, or, aspiring founders that founding a company, it's the hardest and most rewarding thing you will ever do. Right. And when
Mhm.
you talk about the entrepreneurial journey, it's really the entrepreneurial roller coaster. And I tell people when they say, should I start a company? I tell them, no, you start a company when every day you're not working on that concept or that idea you have, when it hurts, when you
Mhm.
have to do it, because you will be tested every single day. And if you don't have that fire in your belly from the get go of this thing needs to exist,
Mhm.
I have to be doing this, you shouldn't do it because there
Yeah.
are plenty of other ways to make money, plenty of other ways to make an impact. And it's a really hard thing.
Yeah. Well, and I want to continue that part of the conversation. So we're going to come back to what you're doing today. And so we're going to save that a little bit towards the end because I think what you just alluded to was this roller coaster and this journey in the beginning and how you are tested every day. Going from the idea to an actual product and coming to market, you will doubt yourself. And I know I can say I did. And I wasn't, I think about it. When I was little, I remember, and I hadn't thought about this till you just said what you said. I used to, like, think about things to, like, invent,
Yeah. Yeah.
and, like, there's a few that I remember going, "I had that idea." Like, I had that idea, like, 10 years ago.
Yep.
Like, "Darn it, I didn't do anything about it." But,
Totally.
now, you think about what it's like to go from the idea to the reality. And so what was that like for you? Like, you had this idea about what to solve for, and then you broadened your perspective with different constituents, but what was the reality of going from, "Let's start to build something," this leap of faith, and actually bringing it to market? What was that like for you?
I mean, there were a couple things that were so important for me. So one, it was the people I had around me,
Mhm.
right? So I really took me a while to find Mike O'Toole, who's Funnel's CTO, my co-founder. Was not an easy process. And this is, back in 2011, the New York City technology scene was just starting to percolate. I sent out an email to my network. Like before then, I was like that weirdo showing up at all those New York City tech meetups. And I was like, are you my co-founder? Are you my co-founder? Going around trying to find the right, like the right person. And then I was like, you know what? I'm going to send out an email to to the people who know me best. Here's where I'm strong. Here's where I'm weak. If anyone knows anyone I should talk to, take them out
Mhm.
for a beer, a cup of coffee, let me know. And a good friend of mine reached out to me and she's like, you got to talk to Mike. And
Mm.
it was one of those things where we came together early days and it was drinks, grabbing dinner, just talking about the market. And we spent some time getting to know each other. And it felt like, oh, wow, like I've got someone here who compliments me really well. And Mike is a super chill guy, like, just really, really balanced. I'm very emotional, very Italian, very passionate, use my hands a lot. In fact, it's very difficult for me not to talk using my hands right now. I don't want to knock anything over.
Yeah, but you and I are alike that way. We're very passionate, and it's funny, our CTO and the person who helped me build Resman is very much the opposite of me.
That's usually the way it goes, right?
Mhm.
But it takes a village. And I
Mhm.
think when you're starting a company, it's all about the people you have around you. Um, and is incredible and very much balanced me out. That was one. I think the other thing that really helped us say, okay, we're going to jump in and we're going to do it
Mhm.
now. We were accepted to an accelerator program called Techstars,
Mm.
which was making its way to New York for the very first time. And, we only applied to one accelerator. That was it. And I don't know
And
how
for our
much.
audience, tell them what an accelerator is.
Sure. So an accelerator is a program that's designed to help early stage startups. And sometimes these companies could just be idea phase,
Mm-hmm.
really help accelerate learnings
Mm-hmm.
and surround them with support and mentorship, sometimes office space to help get their idea or their company off the ground faster.
Wow, I'm not aware of this. Ours story is a lot different
Yeah.
because we built ours in house, so we had no plan to go sell anything.
Yeah.
But that's great to hear. Is there anything in exchange for that?
Yeah. So it's typically an equity percentage in exchange. So how Techstars worked for us was we were given office space with the other companies accepted, and they usually accept anywhere from 8 to 10 companies at a time. Thousands will apply, and they surround you. The thing about Techstars that really stuck out to me was it was very focused on the mentorship piece.
Yeah.
So it was you will receive mentorship from folks who have done it before, from folks who have invested in companies like yours before, and they're going to help you figure out is this a good idea or not. They'll help you tweak the concept, and they'll ideally help you get to market faster. It was one of the best things we did.
Oh yeah.
One, it gave us the guts to say, you know what, let's jump in, let's do this full time. We quit our jobs.
Mhm.
I had about 6 months of personal runway from my paycheck saved up to see if this thing was going to go or not.
Mhm.
And two, it gave us access because remember, I didn't come from real estate or technology. So I didn't have any of those relationships. I didn't have really a mentor network. I got it, or at least the beginnings of it,
Yeah.
out of Techstars. Every mentor we had, they're either friends of mine to this day, advisors to the company. Some of them were even board members for the company over the past decade. It was
Wow.
incredible.
Yeah. I think that's fantastic. And I didn't know that part of the story. And, the whole point of our podcast today is talking about celebrating you, but the entrepreneur's journey. And I think back to our own journey, and we didn't have that. So the trial by fire was extensive. And luckily, a lot of it was done in-house internally because it was our internal product first. Um, but I think about when Mainsail Partners invested in Resman, and I give them shout outs. I think Gavin Turner is one of the most amazing people, and Jason Frankel and the team there that I worked with quite a bit, and Taylor, but they were probably that for us.
Yeah.
It was just later down the road, and that's where I felt like I was able to expedite the learning and avoid some of the. You're always gonna have growing pains, but how deep the cuts are.
Totally.
Because as what can make or break you, and a
Yep.
lot of people struggle through that. So that's a fantastic program, and I would agree. It probably did help a lot because why learn everything the hard way? I think the smartest people are the ones who learn from other people's mistakes. Seek first to understand, master maybe what others have done, and then figure out how to make it better.
100%.
And so that's what that opportunity really provided you.
100%. Yeah. And it also kind of inspired me in a way, which we can maybe talk about later, to pay it forward to other young founders. And by young, I mean young just in their entrepreneurial journey of like trying to figure things out.
It's funny you just mentioned that. There might be a reason I was wanting to know more about this accelerator program.
There you go.
Because at some point, I'm with you. You got to pay it forward. I mean,
Totally.
other people leaned in on us in different ways, but man, not having a background in technology and understanding what that's all about was a real challenge. I felt like I found myself in a whole new career and having to go back to college in real time, while running a management company and starting a software company
And dealing with being a human and questioning yourself. And,
Oh, yeah.
we can probably talk about this for hours, the idea of imposter syndrome and feeling self-conscious about maybe decisions that are made, which I've struggled with. And this is the type of stuff people don't talk about when they
Yeah.
talk about growing a business, operating a business. Oh, everything's up and to the right. Everything's great. That's very rarely the case.
That's very rarely the case. No, and that might be a great segue because you think about what would you say were the biggest challenges for you, thinking about going from maybe startup to come into market,
Yeah.
because you had the sport, you're in the accelerator program, as you started to launch the product and try to actually go out and sell it.
Yeah.
Right. What were some of the big challenges? And there's probably a lot because I know I feel like we had a lot. People don't like to use the word fail. I don't actually have a problem with that word because I think failure is just an opportunity to start again more intelligently. And
Oh,
it's
yeah.
like, in my mind, I'm sometimes black and white. It's like, okay, it either worked or it didn't. So, I mean, we
No
can
gray.
sugarcoat it all you want to, but it either worked or it didn't.
Right.
So if it didn't, we need to start over,
Right.
right? So even if there's something like that, in retrospect, or maybe at the time it was quick retrospect of what worked and what didn't.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, how much time do you have?
The
But
biggest one,
yeah. Oh,
something that might be common to others coming down the space.
so I'll say this. A bunch of lessons learned. I'd say immediately, like right when we were starting the company, a big lesson learned for me was don't be afraid to talk about what you're working on, talk about your idea. I was so worried early on someone would steal our idea.
Mm.
And that prevented me from talking openly about our idea. And at that point, frankly, it was just an idea. And I learned pretty quickly that if you don't talk about it, if you don't engage your customers early and often, you run the
Hmm.
risk of building something no one wants, no one
Oh,
asked you for.
yes.
So,
Well, that for any tech company, you don't have to be an entrepreneur. That is still a challenge even as you grow. And I think it surprises me how easy it is to fall into that and how you have to regroup. I'm a huge believer that, and maybe it's because I was the customer, but whether it's an internal or external customer, if you are open and willing to listen, they will always tell you what you need to do to be successful.
yeah,
And it's weird how we start off that way.
yeah.
And then somewhere along the lines, and it's not just our company, I've seen us struggle with that. I don't know if your company, as you navigated through the different stages of funnel, and maybe it's the investor pressure, I don't know, but we tend to get away from that. And then I've seen, leadership come in and they know what the customer needs.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's the biggest trap.
Yep.
Because unless you do that job, I would argue, no, you don't.
Yeah. Right. Which is why, for me, I think a huge lesson learned there was, when we initially started, we were in this accelerator program. We wanted to build a solution for consumers, people renting apartments, and it was a direct to consumer
Hmm.
B2C solution. We fell on our face. We failed doing that. There's no other way to say it. It was a failure.
Hmm.
We launched a product and it was a solution looking for a problem. And we took a step back
Wow.
and
That was poignant.
yeah, it was no other way to put it. And I was like, crap, we spent all this time building in isolation and we built something and we missed the market. Like we just missed the mark. And that's when I said, you know what? We got to think about things differently. One, we need to engage the whole industry and we need to take a much more holistic view. And that means talking to the
Hmm.
operators, the owners, and really understanding their workflow and what's working and what's not. And two, we've got to feel comfortable talking about what we're thinking and working on and engaging our customers in this way. And that's when the whole game changed. That's when when I shared with you, who else can I meet with? Can I work out of your office? We took a totally different approach.
Hmm.
And that's when things started clicking.
Wow. So since you had to pull back and restart, that takes investment, or or it's eating up what's left of that runway.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
So, at what point did you realize that you were going to have to get some money?
Yeah. So that's actually the perfect segue. So when we had pivoted our business,
Hmm.
we went from B to C, which I would define Funnel's product as B2B2C, right? It's engaging both sides of the industry. We were operating in New York City, which was our home base at that point. We can talk more about that later, but subscribing to the Frank Sinatra theory of if you can make it here, you can make it anywhere.
I would agree with that. We don't have we don't have a decent footprint yet in New York. Maybe you can help us with that.
Oh,
We
whenever you
waited to
want.
go to that market last for what you just said.
Just say the word. New York is a unique snowflake,
It is.
and they know it. But that's where we started because that was our
Mhm.
home base, and frankly, um, it was less expensive for us rather than traveling and flying
Yeah.
all over the country. We said, let's start with what we know, and what we know is here, and I can get access and have conversations with customers in a faster, more meaningful way. And so we started in New York, and things were starting to click. We had pivoted the product. We started building out top of the funnel, which is this marketing and
Mhm.
syndication engine. Um, and it was working. We started to get folks signed up, and I would pop into offices and we were replacing spreadsheets and whiteboards. And I saw the whiteboards come down and they were logging in to our product and living in our product. And things were starting to click. and we were running out of money. And I said to myself, oh man, okay, well, we've got a real shot at this thing, but we've only got a few months in the like of runway in the bank. This is a real problem. And you know, I was a first-time founder at that point. I didn't know, man, like I raised money, and I had raised a little bit of money at this point. I raised money on one thing, and now I'm changing the entire business. I get sued for that? Like, will these investors come? I didn't know.
Oh, wow.
Truth is no, right? But I went to my main investor, just a total like badass female mentor, investor, the best. And I went to her, and I'll never forget this. I was in her office, and I'm sweating, and I'm talking to her about everything we've learned and everything we've done, how we're pivoting the business, we're running out of money, and by the way, I need her to write another check. And I said, so what do you think? She goes, I knew you'd figure it out. She goes, I invested in you and Mike. I knew the real estate industry was big. I thought your product was fine, but I invested in you guys.
Yeah.
And then exhaled, and she ended up leading our round, and we closed on the money, and we lived to see another day. But
so go back a second then. Since you'd already raised some money, did you know this person beforehand, as from your previous work experience or personal life, or was there some vehicle that helped you get introduced to investors?
Yeah, so that Techstars program I mentioned, that accelerator program, really helped with that.
Yeah.
So
another reason I wish I had known about that. So it's funny. I don't know if I ever told you this, but so when we embarked, and I wondered about this, and I'm guessing you did because of just the nature of the accelerator program, putting together a plan, like, what's our market opportunity? What's the TAM? How are we going to go to market? What does that look like? Because we built our solution in-house for in-house use, and it was our customers who really pushed us, well, I say customers. We had it was my peers in the industry who got wind of Resman and said, hey, you guys should sell this. I don't think you know what you have. I was like, nah. And then we did some testing. It was like, well, maybe we do.
Maybe.
And again, kudos to our teams that helped us. It's a reflection of real people and the jobs that they do. But then we, well, great. Let's get all geared up and go to market. And had no idea what we were doing, and figured out pretty quickly we needed to raise money. I mean, money was running out fast. Yeah. And I was just I Googled angel investors. This is a true story. I Googled angel investors, and I called, I can't even tell you how many. I talked to so many receptionists. And the funniest story is Todd Gardner and Gardner Associates, that's an angel investment group. It's just one of those fate things, driving down the highway, and didn't expect to get through to anybody except maybe leave a voicemail or another receptionist.
Yep.
And for whatever reason, the CEO of that company, Todd Gardner, picked up the phone. I almost drove off the road. I'm not kidding. Because I assumed I was talking to just another receptionist. So I'm like, blah, 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 blah. Yeah. It was not polished because I've been turned down so many times, and nothing ever, didn't materialize. And I was like, I would just really like a chance. Somebody get me in front of somebody. I know I have something.
Yeah.
And he's like, well, I'm probably the person you'd want to get in front of. I'm like, wait, what? He's like, I'm the CEO. I'm not kidding. I was on 121 in Dallas. And that's a true story. And but because of that, that leaning in and having somebody is so important. And that's why I wondered, because raising the money is hard.
Oh, yeah.
And in fairness, we didn't fit his investing model. And I think we'd be remiss if we didn't talk about that. I don't know if you experienced this with other rounds, but one of the things I learned from the first group that came in and the second group is Mainsail was really instrumental later in helping us even get the first round, because they shaped the conversation and they prepared me about what it would look like, what kind of KPIs I should be looking at. Well, actually, Todd Gardner sent me out the SaaS KPIs for dummies. I'm not kidding. I still have it somewhere.
Oh, I got it.
But coming to market and understanding that you can get in front of an investor who can believe in you. But some of these firms, these private equity firms, they have a specific model that works and they stick with it for a reason.
Oh, yeah.
And that, to me, I think is important for people to know that might be listening to us talk about this. because it's not a reflection on you or your products at the time. And I think I was blessed that Gavin said, "Hey, no, you've got something. We just want to help you get to the point you fit our model." And so they helped advise us
Yep.
behind the scenes.
So I'm glad you brought this up because I talk to founders about this a lot. And this is an area that I feel like doesn't get a lot of love or a lot of attention, and it should. First of all, I've been told no way more times than I've been told yes. Okay. You just need one to say yes. And I tell founders this all the time, especially from kind of our background, right? Funnel's a venture backed company. Move now, right? Venture backed company. I've been involved now. This is my second venture backed business, and I advise venture backed businesses. It's a venture capitalist job to say no.
Mm-hmm.
Think about it, right? Just look at the numbers. If you look at your standard venture fund, maybe they invest in 10, 12 companies a year. They look at thousands,
Yeah.
right?
Yep.
And that doesn't mean that the, call it 2,990 companies they don't invest in, doesn't mean they're bad companies.
Yeah.
It just means might not fit their thesis.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe they've already invested in that space and they don't want to be over-indexed. Could be that the partner woke up and had a really bad morning. Really. Could be that simple.
It could be that simple.
So I think and I struggled with this, not taking the no personally, where it's like you put your blood, sweat, and tears into a business and you're sacrificing, you're working long hours, you're not spending time with your loved ones, you're throwing yourself into this. And when you hear someone kind of pull back the curtain, you're showing KPIs, you're giving them the whole pitch, and they say no, that can feel like,
Oh, yes, it can.
right? And it's really important that you remind yourself that it's not personal. It could be a variety of those factors.
Yeah.
Could be any of them, but that's their job to say no. And again, it's I feel like founders forget this too. I certainly forgot this. It's just as much of an interview and kind of dating process for the founder as it is the investor.
Right. And today's no could be tomorrow's yes, which was exactly what happened with us.
Happened with us too.
Yeah. And I think, if we're, transparent in our conversation, I can tell you there were times where I dealt with, some bias about being a female entrepreneur in tech. And it was blatant in some rooms where we pitched.
Yeah.
You have to be careful as a woman in technology that you don't want that to become an excuse. You don't want that to become the first thing that you look to. Because if that is your perception and going in and presenting, because I was warned about that. But you can't let that become your perception or let your perception become your reality or someone else's perception become your reality. And I say that because there were times, there was no doubt about it, wouldn't even address me in the meeting.
Yep, same.
But then there's also times where I think, if I'm honest, I look back and I think maybe I thought that was part of the reason we had the no. But in fairness, I can look back now and realize maybe I didn't present as well as the other companies that were in front of them that they went with. That as time went on and you get in front of more opportunities, right, to present yourself in your company, and you're open and you listen to that feedback, I know our deck continued to change. I know the way we presented continued to change. And I think about the way I would do that now versus the way I did it then, especially in the early stages. And I'm like, okay, was it what you thought it was, or honestly, was it you? And I think because we talk about that, some imposter syndrome, but sometimes you got to look in the mirror. And I don't know if you ever had that experience, but I know I did. And I made a point of reflecting about that later.
Yeah, no, I'm glad you brought that up. I think both can be true, right? And I think it's maybe a bit of work on the individual's end to say, okay, I need to thread the needle here and pull out kind of what's on my side of the street and what my part was in this. And also, yeah, there could be some bias in those conversations, right? I've been in pitches where went in with my CFO and all the questions, I introduced myself as CEO and founder, and all the questions were going to the man in the room. And one question in particular, tell me why you started the company. And I said, excuse me, I'm here. I'll tell you why we started the company. But I'm one of the founders. And it was, there's some blatant bias like that. And then there are other things that for instance, with TAM exercises, right? talking about the size of the market. I had to do a lot of work with that. Well, how big is the multifamily real estate market really? And I'm thinking to myself, it's easy to say, well, is it because I'm a female working on this, that it's a lifestyle business that I have to chat? But also when I really look at it, okay, well, maybe I needed to do a better job in the pitch explaining what this opportunity is and what this looks like when
Yeah.
it gets big. So like I say that because I think it's important to figure out, like, yes, there could be some bias happening, and it could be that there's some lessons in there to be learned and
Yep.
gleaned around what my part in this could be and how could I be better and how can I improve, because feedback is a gift. And when you're, operating at a certain level and you're leading a company, you don't get it that
Yeah.
often.
Yeah.
So when you do get, you should try to solicit it and get it as often as you can. And when you do get it, don't be defensive. Try not to be reactive. Try to take those pieces with you and figure out, okay, how can I improve and how can I do it differently next time?
Yep. No, I completely agree. I think that's some wise words, and I think if anyone out there that's trying to do, well, start their own business that's in those early stages, everything's a learning opportunity.
Oh, yeah.
It's all everything about it's an opportunity, and it's how you choose to deal with it.
Mhm.
You know, and I think about those times. I'm sure you got to those moments where you're like, "Is anybody going to invest?" So, what did you do? Was there anything you did personally to help you keep up the good fight?
Yeah. I'd say honestly, the biggest thing for me, um, because I talk about how challenging and rewarding the job is. It's also the loneliest job in the world. People don't talk about that. It is the loneliest
Hmm.
job in the world. You don't have anyone you can talk to within the company, or sometimes it feels that way, right? To talk really about the ugly parts. I'm worried we're going to run out of money. Imagine saying that to a team member, right? And like, I mean, what do they do with that, right? That's
Hmm.
not necessarily something you want them to have to hold. Um,
Well, it's not their burden.
it's not their burden. Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. So it's yours, right? So
Hmm.
how do you hold that and stay sane and calm and all the things, right? My founder friends are everything.
Hmm.
Um, Being able to have vulnerable, open, honest conversations, and this is certainly not every founder I've met,
Hmm.
right? But there were a handful, particularly early days of building out Funnel. Um, the good, the bad, the ugly. I could call them at 10 in the morning or 10 o'clock at night, and vice versa.
Hmm.
And that saved me, truly.
Yeah. I think we talked about this once. There was was it NMHC? I think there was an event both of us were participating in,
Yes.
and we met virtually. And the part of being lonely that's a true statement. And I think even for myself, I was, I felt a lot of pressure. And I don't know if you felt this too, being a female face of the company in technology and knowing that there's a certain perception, especially at the time in multifamily, about these tech startups, and we didn't fit the mold, neither one of us.
Yeah.
And feeling like and I think maybe some of it definitely was self imposed. To what degree it was really there out in the market, I don't know, but I know I felt like I had to overthink and be extra cautious with what I did, how I said things, how I was presented at all times, because it was viewed differently and a little more harshly. Like, I felt like I had to work twice as hard to come out of the gate with any credibility, where other people in my same shoes that were in startups didn't. And then when I had challenges inside the company, I was so afraid to talk about them outside of the company, to lean on anybody in the industry because I didn't want anything to hurt Resman. I didn't want anything to be, because we had such a fight to begin with in our
Yeah.
space.
Yeah.
I don't know if you ever dealt with any of that.
Oh, yeah, of course. And, um, it's scary to be vulnerable. And yeah, you always want to, I always thought about protecting the company, right? And if that means that I need to suffer so that the company can do well, then I suffer, right? And I operated like that for a very long time. And that's probably another conversation or like another topic we can dive into. Um, but yeah, it was, it's certainly, I didn't kind of share with everyone, right? But
Hmm.
there was a small group of folks where I felt like I could just exhale.
Yeah.
And that was helpful. The other thing I'll say, and this was probably a big lesson learned, probably the biggest, I'd say. You talk about sacrifice, right? And well, if I have to suffer so the company can do well. That was the wrong attitude to have. And it's a daily reprieve for me. Even now in my new life, it moved, not burning the candle at both ends. But I operated for a very long time. Like, this is ours to lose. And there's so much pressure, especially as a female founder, female CEO, for this company to do well. This cannot fail. And the people who love me will just have to understand. I might not show up for holidays or events or whatever. I need to work my tail off. And I don't have time to invest in anything else. And that was the wrong attitude, because truly investing in yourself and showing up as a fuller version of yourself is the best thing you can do for the company.
That's a struggle, though.
Yes.
I still wonder, because I think back, and my son, he's 25 now. And I remember we were at going to a soccer tournament up in Arkansas. So we drove. He's a senior in high school, and I don't even know how we got on the conversation, but Grant was sitting on the side of the car, and he was saying, I really appreciated that you always showed up for our events. Like, I never missed an event. Now, whether I was present at the event was a different story. And, and shame on me, because I do regret this, but it was Grant that pointed this out to me. And I think it helped me think about the rest of our employees going forward. I appreciated that you were always there. I know how hard it was, and I know that you did that for us. He said, but you don't know how many times I looked up in the stands after because he played defense. Yeah. He goes, I would, do something pretty, amazing, or I'd save a ball or get the ball, and I would look up and you were on your phone. He's like, you missed it. And I was like, oh, yeah, talk about bawling. I'm just going to admit it. I was like,
that's like that next, like, ooh, like dagger through the heart.
Oh my gosh. And, and I think about that now, because I still struggle thinking about what it took to actually get where we are. And I know the amount of time, and maybe there's things I could have done different to put more weight on other people.
Yeah.
But if I struggle with this, because I look back and I think about, well, what if I had pulled back, would we still be where we are?
Yeah.
And I think I also took I took home the weight of every employee that jumped in early, and it was rough in the early years, that had that leap of faith with me. And then when things got really tight and we got really nervous, and I learned you can chew off fake fingernails, the customers, like our customers that took a leap of faith, like, failure was not an option.
Yeah.
Period. This was my industry. I spent my decades here. I'm like, I could not let these people down. And I do wonder, like, did I let my family down? And is it wrong now that I'm in a position now where I'm going to be able to dedicate back to them? And like I said, I thought I was present. I think I still don't know if I know the right answer about how do you balance it and do enough.
This to me is like the silver bullet. Like, I still don't know what that is. I still struggle with it. I help.
Because you're in a new role now that's a young company.
Oh, yeah. And I'm burning the candle at both ends again. Meanwhile, I'm telling some of my founders who I advise and coach, can't burn the candle at both ends. So in many ways, it's hypocritical, but I am very open with them, just like I'm going to be open with you now. This is something I still struggle with. Mm-hmm. But I will say, I remember the things I missed, the events I missed, like family events. Mm-hmm. I don't remember what was so important at the time that I had to miss it.
Yeah, that's a good point. It's a fair point.
Right? So it's like, I don't know if that's just better boundary setting of, like using your son's game as an example. Is it the boundary of when I'm there, phones off, and like just is it something else? I don't know what the silver bullet is, but I just know injecting a bit more balance than what I've had previously is important, and trying to keep myself honest when I feel like I'm going the other way and swinging the pendulum 100% towards work. And I will say this, I think I'm just wired. Like, I thought to myself, now that it's like the second go around, is it going to be different? Will I still bring like that relentlessness of like working so hard? Will it be different the second time around? It's not.
Well, it's funny you say that, because I'm not sure I'm recommending this, because I have Well, anyone who knows me knows I am a freak of nature with this weird energy level that I have that is never ending. I always joke, it's like, oh, I was, I was genetically wired for this because it was meant for Resman. But one of the things I tried to do is I did try to carve out time. So, but I don't know if everyone else could do that. Like I wouldn't work. I would have, when I came home from work, I wouldn't start working till after everybody went to bed.
Okay.
So that helped me become more present.
Yeah.
And then, like with my husband, I mean, I would rather work all night during the week and put in those hours and then have some time on the weekend that is truly carved out shutdown time.
Yep.
Um, I think I probably could have taken more vacations. I think I was fooling myself. I didn't take enough. And I would say that's probably one of the important things is, and of course, depending on your startup, you may not be able to afford to go anywhere, but camping is pretty cheap. I was just going to say.
It's another startup hack.
Yeah. Get out and decompress. I definitely know I could have done more of that, and I wish I had. So I would say you do make time for that, and then you've got to lean on your teams and say, this is the time I need, and that gives them a time to step up too. And then you might find it's easier the next time you're taking personal time, that you have that confidence that you can let go.
Yeah.
But it's hard in the beginning because it's easy to say, but in reality, you're wearing so many hats and there's so many things to balance out. And until you get a good team, and it's interesting, I can see it now when I have a good team and we have all the right people in the right seats at Resman right now. And I waited for this for so long.
Yeah.
I can feel it. And it was definitely cemented in from our user conference we just got back from. But I knew that coming in, and I can feel the shift. And I think, so maybe we talk about that part next, because we did cycle through some different leadership and people, in different roles in the company over the years.
Likewise.
And, I can look back and think about how some of that, like that ditch to ditch, there's a joke about us at some point. I think we had schizophrenic marketing. I was like, who are we?
Sure, every company's gone through that, whether or not they admit it. But
I'll admit it. I will admit it. I know we did. And it's like, what is that process like to get the right people in the company to finish the vision, to share the vision and to get the execution where it needs to be, without spending a lot of capital? Because that's the other thing nobody told me about. When you don't have the right people in the seat, it costs money.
oh my gosh.
And it costs you to come up with capital calls. I can attest to that.
Well, yeah, and because it's also the cost of a bad hire. It's not just what you're paying them; it's the cost to replace them, the mind share, the time you're spending, and other people on your team might be spending, to kind of make up for that cost of rehiring that person or kind of rehiring someone new, and the time lost, right? So I think it's real, and I could nerd out all day on books I've read and interview questions and a process to run. And I've certainly learned a lot in how to hire, how to run reference checking, how to really make sure that you're trying to tick off all the boxes, how to fire and how to part ways with someone who's not working out. I think lesson learned there is you're doing someone a great disservice if you're keeping someone on board who won't work. No one likes to do stuff that they're not good at. No one likes to it's one thing to
It's
fail
soul
and learn.
sucking to be
It
to
is.
work hard and not being a natural fit, and so you can never be great, and you might even barely be good. But
Yeah.
that's really draining. I would
Exactly.
agree. I think
Yeah.
that's worth diving into.
You're doing someone a disservice if you look the other way or you kick the can down the road. The best thing to do is to have a conversation openly and honestly and quickly, right? There's that old adage, hire slow, fire fast.
Yeah.
It's very true.
Yeah.
I
I would agree with that.
Yeah. So, I'd say team building, the other thing to call out about team building, sometimes the right folks early on are not the right people as the company scales, right? So you talk about having everyone in the right seat today.
Yep.
But you might have had everyone in the right seat 5 years ago and then something changed, right? And maybe
Yep.
it took some time to get that kind of calibration.
As the business goes through the various phases of scaling the business, I 100% agree. I mean, any number of white papers you can read on this. And there's one in particular, and I can't remember the name of it now, but it talked about the company as it goes from, the first 5 employees to the first 25 to the 75 to the 150, and how many of those will stay
Yeah.
through the various phases and why. And I remember reading that thinking, somebody's been watching us at Resman. They're reading, this is about us. But it's
It's a
true
case study.
because it's such a different dynamic. And there's things that people like about certain stages. And it's funny, it was one of my questions I wrote down that we just naturally found ourselves coming into anyway, was about that being part of a startup is not for everyone. And being part of a big, company that's moving into a corporate environment is not for everyone. And there's different challenges along the way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And those conversations are tough.
Yeah. And it's also interesting to think about when I don't know if you did this, but I know there was different periods where I'm like, okay, what I'm lacking in is the true technology background. And we would talk about that. And so we would look to bring in, others who had SaaS backing or SaaS knowledge or, a different level of experience from our perception that we felt we needed to bring into the company. And one of the things that surprised me was in the interview process, it's really, and I'm still struggling with how I would interview differently to understand this, but rolling up the sleeves and digging in, like bringing somebody who's from a well-oiled machine, some companies have 1,500, 2,000, 5,000 employees into a company that has 100, 150.
Yeah.
They think they want to do it. They think they know. But unless they've actually, I think that's what I've learned. Unless somebody's actually been through the journey, and I think if I was going back, I would look for that because it is a lot different than you think. And I also think too, when people come into a company, if you've never been part of the startup and you've never gone through those various stages of growth, you don't understand the decision making that takes place. And so it's really easy for someone who's come into an organization that's already well established and to see how things should be or are.
Yeah.
And then to look back at a smaller company and make some judgments about what we did or didn't do.
Yeah.
But you weren't there when we had 100 fires and every one of them had literally almost the same level of priority and you're having to pick and choose. And so, I think those were really aha moments that we learned in a painful way because and some of them are not here today.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
as they came in, they couldn't make that adjustment.
It's true. Yeah. And I think, depending on the company, like I think we pretty much all of our, and we learned this over time, pretty much all of our job descriptions as we got more mature, it was like startup experience, right? And it was that way because adjusting from big company culture and resources
And
support,
resources. That's the key word right there.
it's
like,
it's brutal. It's brutal. And, for the company, when we were starting to really hire quite a bit, it was tough because it was like we couldn't, I hate to say it this way, but it was like there were certain roles and certain areas within the organization where we needed to hire folks who already knew what they were kind of getting into and versus, training someone up of this is what it's going to be like at a startup. Didn't have the time or the resources to train those folks into the startup world. So we had to hire folks who already had that experience, who already knew coming in what they were kind of signing up for. But it's a wild adjustment.
Yeah, it really was.
And sometimes it's a wild adjustment the other way when you hire people who only know startups, that as the company starts to grow and get bigger, sometimes they can't evolve with the company and grow with the company in that way. And their highest and best is being really, really early and then moving on to the next company that's really, really early and kind of rinse and repeat, you know?
They find their fit and they know what they're good at.
Yeah.
And I understand that now. I don't think I understood. I definitely didn't understand that when we first got started.
Same for me.
Because it's really different in the property management space. The whole business model, everything I grew up with in the industry was it naturally scales. And so you can still make that adjustment because you're still ultimately going back down to a property.
Yep.
Like you're still engaged at a property level. This was so dynamically different. And, people have always asked me about, it's always funny. It's like, oh, you're still there? At Resmond, really? I'm like, they never say it like high five. No, that never happens.
Like,
It's more
still doing that?
like, how'd you do that? And I think about that too when even as think about the employees that are still with us and how many have, taken my, please come and talk to my open door policy. I'm like, I'm here. I really am an open book. We'll get through this together. And whatever you're going through in your department, I assure you, I have gone through for this company as well. And it really comes down to this, how you're going to adjust to change. Because nobody has probably been through more change than I have inside Resmond. But it's an attitude. It's how you choose to look at it.
Yeah.
And whether or not you make the mental commitment to, I want to be part of the next chapter.
Yeah. No, and it's and I think also navigating, like, it's your reaction to it, right? Which
Mhm.
is what you're saying. And I feel like great leaders see things as they are, no better, no worse. And it's like when you're going through, whether it's a rough spot or a rough time, it's always helped me to say, man, I've been here before. I
Mhm.
felt this feeling before. Maybe I haven't dealt with this exact situation before. And I got through it. I got out on the other side, and I'm going to do it again.
Mhm.
And just trying to stay somewhat level, because I can be a very emotional, passionate person, as can you. Why we get along so well. But that means I feel things
Mhm.
deeper, and like I can feel the lows, and that can drag me down, and I can have fun with the highs, right? And celebrate. And I've really done a lot of work to try to just say, okay, just try to stay level,
Mhm.
because you felt this before, you'll feel it again, but you'll
Yeah.
get through it.
Yeah. It's funny you say that because I think even in leadership, that's not that I do this all the time, but I think one of the things that's helped us with Resmond and pulling our teams through, a lot of the challenges in early times, and I'm the behind the scenes person. I think it, I don't know if there's anybody I don't really talk to in the company, but when I get those opportunities and when people are really struggling, I do seem to be somebody that they'll lean on, and I like that. And it's knowing that I have to be the calm in the storm and the ultimate optimist, which is a choice about it. And I think there's times where I was faking it till I made it, but now I think too, I think about how many really harrowing situations we went through at various times.
Oh, yeah.
And like what you just said, that feeling is you have to take a moment, step back, and remember what you have been through. They will help you through the hard times because, in fact, we did get through. And I remember, oh my gosh, one of the times we had an issue, and we're on the Azure platform, and Resmond went down. First time it ever happened, and it hasn't. I think it's only happened like once or twice, I think. And we're trying to figure it out. All of our customers can't get into Resmond. Sure, it hasn't figured out the answer yet. And of course, we have SLAs that we commit to. Thank goodness we're rock solid. I don't want to jinx anything. Knock on wood. But that moment we couldn't access Resmond. I don't even have high blood pressure. I have low blood pressure, and I remember the feeling. I literally thought I was gonna. I thought I was gonna pass out.
Yep.
I'm like, oh my God, what do you do?
Yeah.
And it was terrifying.
Mhm.
And but we got through it,
You got through it.
and we communicated with customers. We got a plan. So whenever things get really stressful, I'm like, remember,
You can point to that moment. And if I can get
yes,
through that,
you can get through anything.
totally.
Yeah.
That happened to me once. I was on an investor pitch when that happened, doing a demo of the product. And I said, well, let's, we're going to pivot the conversation really quick. This was very, very early days when it was just Mike with smoke coming out of his fingers while he was coding like a madman. But you get through these things, right?
Mhm.
And then you can point to that thing and say, well, we got through that and
Yeah.
we'll get through this. But it takes a lot of work.
Yeah. I don't know too if you learn this another lesson, and it's about our tech entrepreneurial's journey. I didn't even know I was a product manager when I started. I didn't know that was what my name was. I didn't know that's what I was doing. In fact, I've since learned I was awful in the beginning, and I don't know how Nick and the rest of the team didn't get a rope and string me up because I didn't give them the full vision. It was definitely not the way it should be.
Hindsight.
But what I also didn't realize is the difference in product managers and the difference between maintenance product managers and innovative product managers. And that was also a hard lesson learned, I think, in our company because we talk about bringing people in at the right stages at the right time.
Yeah.
Somebody that hasn't innovated, that's only been brought in to, basically do maintenance on a product and bug fixes.
Tweak the machine, not build the machine.
Yes. That, I don't know. Did you have any of those real life experiences with Funnel or with where you're at and even now?
Yeah, we definitely did. And I think part of that too is like hiring profile and also from company background, right? Like you could look at, we had a list of inspirational companies. Man, it would be awesome if we could hire a product person from this company or a salesperson from that company. And what I realized was, well, what stage of that company do you want to hire from? Do you want the guy
Mm-hmm.
or gal who built the beginning, either code base or product roadmap or
Mm-hmm.
sales process? Or do you want the person who's refining the machine at the
Mm-hmm.
company today?
Yeah.
So we started kind of bifurcating of, well, we want past life. We want the early people at XYZ companies, because it's exactly what you said. It's a very different profile. Sometimes it's a different personality. It's a
Mm-hmm.
different level of risk
Mm-hmm.
that person's willing to take on. And we learn by, I hate to say it, but by making some mistakes in
Yep.
our hiring
Totally.
process and having to fix it later.
Yeah. And I think basically what we're shaping up in this conversation is a young startup out there and an entrepreneur um, is maybe understanding the stages of growth. I think what I hear us both kind of alluding to is if we were to go back and maybe you can shed some light on this, but going back, if you were to do this again, oh, wait, you are. Wait a minute. Aren't you doing that right now? I'm
Kind
not.
of am.
But
Yeah.
thinking about how you align in stages, because I agree. I think that's the biggest lesson learned now is how could I, and maybe the accelerator programs or something like that would help people with that. But you're right. There are different stages for a reason. There's different challenges. There's different needs. There's a different attitude. There's different risk. There's different compensation for the people who are willing to take that risk.
Yep.
Um, that's probably one of the things I would go back and do different. S- I would have searched out and tried to understand that
Yeah.
in more detail.
Yeah. And I think also, like, I think big lesson learned for me is like really take your time
Mhm.
hiring. It's that hire slow methodology. And like I've gotten like a little crisper on the hiring process we
Mhm.
run. And again, it's designed to make sure that we have the right individual for the company and the company is the right company for the individual.
Mhm.
Um, so the hiring process is slower than the one I used to run, but it's done methodically and thoughtfully,
So
and that's by design.
does that cause you any challenges in our market today? Because right now the Great Resignation.
Hmm.
It's such a competitive landscape, right?
Yeah.
So, they say that the longer you try to execute those things, that
Yeah.
people are making decisions in 48 hours now.
Yeah. Well, I think something that's served us well, that has been a lesson learned for me, is building kind of a deep bench of candidates. So
Hmm.
I always say, like, probably biggest lesson learned for me is date before you get married in all ways.
Hmm.
Investors, team members, right?
Hmm.
That can apply to multiple relationships. For hiring, I'm often seeding relationships very early with top talent. We might, and I'm very straightforward. If we don't have an open role, I'll let them know that. But I'm kind of hiring months in advance, building the team months in advance of actually pulling the
Hmm.
trigger with someone. And yeah, in a market like this, right? Sometimes you're hiring opportunistically,
Hmm.
right? Or someone who you've known is looking and picking up their head, and it's like, man, we're not going to have that JD open for 3 more months, 4 more months, or maybe
Yeah.
even 6 more months, and you have to make the call. You're going to hire them early because it's the right person and it's the
Yeah.
person you'd want for that. So you have to make trade-offs sometimes with timelines and all that. But I will say it's really important to spend time with people and start to cultivate a network as often as you possibly can do it.
Yep. So when you're talking about teams and team building and having the right people in the right times, makes me think about like the culture. How would you have characterized maybe the culture and how did that evolve over time? At Funnel and now at Moved. How's that look? How's that shaping?
Yeah, so it's funny you mentioned this because right shortly before I stepped out of the day-to-day at Funnel, I ran point on a core values exercise that we ran and how core values were going to be implemented throughout the organization. And it was maybe my third time going through that core values process at Funnel because the company continued to change and
Hmm.
evolve. And the folks that were attracted to the business and the folks, we wanted to bring on as employees, as the company grew, that shifted and that evolved. I wouldn't recommend changing your core values often, but over a 12-year period, we probably went through the exercise 3 times,
Yeah.
which feels about right.
Mm-hmm.
Looking at it, re-examining it. I'd say early days, everyone sweeps the floors, right? That relentlessness, that grit,
Mm-hmm.
the idea of it's not my job, like, is not in your vocabulary, right? Like, we
Yes.
needed people who were kind of Swiss Army knives,
Mm-hmm.
right? And then as the company evolved, right, we really placed an emphasis on collaboration and working as a team. Not that we didn't before, but it was really important to be able to work cross departmentally. And
Yep.
there were certain skill sets that became really important that maybe early days we didn't emphasize as much.
Mm.
And that obviously changed the culture or core
Yeah.
values, which I'd say is the foundation of it. It evolved over time.
Mm-hmm. Did you guys ever struggle with any like silos developing? I know we did. I can just tell you at one point we did. And we're still working through that. And I
Yeah.
think we were right on the verge of understanding that, as we started to grow, just something dynamically, and maybe it was the way some of our meetings internally had changed, but it definitely started to be, I mean, everyone's got their own, budgets that they have to adhere to in their departments. And, somewhere along the line, we weren't collaborating like we used to.
Yeah.
It seemed to change at a certain point, and it seemed to be like all I have to do is I have to hit my numbers here, and it's all about our department and what we're trying to accomplish without any real appreciation or conversation,
Yeah.
which was on us. We should have recognized this and done something to bring this together, because before we had always had our budget conversations together as a team.
Yeah.
So when we would look at, and I would advise that still, and I think we're doing that now, is, as I'm evaluating what is my P&L for, support and customer success, but I'm over here looking at product, or I'm over here looking at sales, we still have a bottom line number we're trying to get to, right? That we still have to commit to. But if there's going to be trade-offs, having conversations and letting the leaders come together and negotiate those trade-offs and understand the impact of, well, I'm fighting for this, or I'm not going to do this, and this is the challenge
Yeah.
that it's going to create this arm of the business, which will eventually come back to haunt you. Having those conversations, I
Yep.
think, is super important because it gets a different level of buy-in. I also think, unfortunately for us, the pandemic and going remote, we were starting to struggle with some silo thinking, and I think definitely in the 20, that kind of materialized in a different way.
Yeah, no, that's a really good point. I think it's something. I mean, one, I think it's so great that you guys are addressing it and trying to figure out, like, calling it out and saying, okay, we're failing here, or we need to do better in this
Hmm.
area. It's something that we're thinking about talking a lot at Moved right now. Some of the things we've implemented. One, just ongoing cadence for all hands meetings. We do leadership team huddles, trying to start to, have goals shared
Hmm.
across the company and talk about not just the output, but some of the inputs. And here are the
Hmm.
things we're trying, and here's what's working, and here's what's not, and here's why. Um, Trying to bring people into the why behind things, I think, is really important
Oh,
because
I
if
agree.
if you can give that context, it builds empathy as well, right?
Hmm. No, the why. Simon Sinek, why? Anybody that's in technology and a startup has probably seen that TED Talk. If not, you should. Because that is what matters. And especially when you're asking people to wear so many hats. But in general, I always think about when companies get so large, that they lose that. And I don't want to lose that. And I realize there's structure that has to be put in place. And, you can't have the same personal relationship with everyone. I mean, it's hard now. We have, I think, 200 employees.
Oh, wow. That's awesome.
Yeah, I think we're over 200. That's a challenge, thank goodness there wasn't anybody at the user conference that I'm like, do I know you?
Right. What's your
I
name
was like,
again?
I said, please don't let that happen to me. Um,
Yeah, that's like a dark day, I feel like, right? When
yeah,
that happens,
I was
especially
like,
for people like me and you.
yeah, and
Yeah.
it's like, no, I don't want that to happen. So luckily it didn't. But thinking about how do you keep that team culture and how do you avoid falling into it's funny that the corporate culture that we all, I think sometimes we picture in our heads is not a good one.
Yeah.
And I thought about like who our hero companies are. I remember we did a lot of YouTube watching of Zappos,
Oh, yeah. That's a
right?
big one.
Yeah, but then I've since read and followed Glassdoor and seen how it's changed too. I mean,
Yeah.
I don't know if it's still that way, so I'm not slamming Glassdoor or Zappos by anyway, but I was always just impressed with the way their teams were. And I think part of it was allowing people to be their authentic selves. And by allowing like them to be their authentic selves in our company allows Resman to be its authentic self.
Yeah.
We don't need to be another Yardi or another Real Page. We already have that in the industry.
Yeah.
We need to be Resman. And part of being Resman is this, dress how you want to dress. Like, be comfortable. Just get the work done. We can celebrate. Just do the job that needs to be done and do it well. And whatever it takes for that to happen is part of that. And it's funny because we just had this discussion about benefits, and we have flex PTO. Like we don't have we have unlimited PTO.
Unlimited. Yep. Sure. Yeah.
And
Us too.
every fear, and this is advice I would say to anybody out there who considers it and shies away from it. I heard people warn me, like, don't fight it, because you're not going to have the problem you think you're going to have. You're going to think everybody's going to take off and nobody's going to show up.
You actually
for
might
work.
have the opposite problem.
We did.
Talk about. Yep.
Nope. 100%. In fact, we had the opposite problem, and people told me that it's like when you roll that out, you're going to see that they take even less time.
Yeah.
There's something mental about having the time on the clock. That's why I got to take it.
Yeah.
But when it's not there, people stay more committed, and it's like, yeah, we'll get to it. And what we found is our employees weren't taking any time off, so we had to implement Resman holidays where we forced it.
Yeah.
So we have 3 or 4 unique Resman holidays a year on top of all the federal holidays that we recognize, because it's like, you will shut off.
To just encourage that time.
Yes.
Shut off and
Yes.
just stop it.
Yes.
Yeah.
Exactly.
I mean, that's really, really important. I'd say this is something, as far as culture building benefits, I think, when it's done well, everyone's involved in the conversation in some way, shape, or form, right? And 2, you're looking at it. Maybe you're not changing your core values often, but you're looking at, how do they show up? How do we show up for each other? How do we hold ourselves accountable? And you're constantly trying to thread that throughout the organization, because I think when core values are done well, they show up every single day. They're not written on a board or on a website somewhere.
I would agree. That's why it's really short. But I think there's a reason one of our core values kind of took hold, and it's a hashtag win together. I just said it.
And there it is.
Hashtag.
Showing up again.
There it is. But we got so much traction with that because I think people generally believe that. And it is, we spend so much time at work. I'm not saying anything anybody probably doesn't already know, but why not enjoy and be proud of one another and have people you enjoy working with? Doesn't mean things aren't going to get hard and people will get testy.
Yep.
But just knowing we are in fact in this together and everybody's got to pull their weight. I think one of the things that I fear is, when I bring in people from much larger companies, or they're interviewing, is this concept of, it's not my job.
Yeah.
And in the beginning, you're right. Those words don't even exist.
Yeah.
But I know that in other companies, I see it. I can tell you, I deal with other supplier partners, customers. And to me, that's the biggest fear I have. I don't want that to happen in our company. And I know you got to have specialized, but what causes that, do you think, to happen? Well, how do companies get to a point where you have people sitting in a seat that are like, I'm just going to do my job and that's it? Is it because it's just become a job?
I think when you stop hiring, if you're not willing to hire and fire based on core values, I think that's when that starts happening. Personally.
Yeah.
If you think about sort of like attitude and aptitude on an X and Y axis, right? The types of people you want to hire and keep and retain and invest in, it's the upper quadrant, right? The high attitude, high aptitude.
Right.
High attitude, low aptitude. Try to coach those people up, right? You try to get them to a place where they know what great looks like, or they know what good looks like, and you try to get them there. And if you can't get them there, ideally the parting of ways conversation is a bit more open, and it's open in the sense of there are no surprises.
Right.
They know what good is. The most dangerous people are the high aptitude, low attitude. That's not my job people, or worse, right? But again, like, I think when you have core values in place and they show up every day, you're either not letting people in the door who don't share those core values. Or if you do, they're either self-selecting or you're kind of
Mm-hmm.
spotting them quickly. Because I think if you're willing to hire and fire based on those, ideally, you know,
Yep. And you're right. I like that you pointed out about no surprises.
yeah,
Because if you're honest and transparent, so one of the exercises that we did and we did again this year, we're going through it, is we establish our vision for the company and what our strategic goals are going to be, and how we're going to what initiatives will help us accomplish those strategic goals. So we have that for the company as a whole, and then we've taken that down to each of our various departments that help accomplish that goal.
yep.
So we all have the same goal, but now it's what's my contribution to that goal.
Oh,
And I think that's really been really helpful in understanding what and then the measures for that success are.
oh yeah.
And and it was actually our former CEO who took this down to the next level, which I actually thought was a great idea, and I could see how it benefited us, as we then took it down to the employee level.
I love that.
And that was I thought it was a great exercise. I enjoyed being part of it. I personally worked through with our customer success arm of the business, of having, someone who answers the phone, being able to see that correlation between what they're doing every day in and day out and how it helps accomplish their own personal goals, that then accomplish the department goals, help the company goals. But having those clearly defined measures makes that conversation so much easier.
Oh, totally. And also, by the way, like I think helps a ton with retention and helping people feel engaged in what they're doing, especially as a
Mhm.
company scales. Like, think about it, right? Early days, the idea of coming in and feeling the impact you could make,
Oh,
it was like addicting, right?
mhm,
And I think early days, you have a certain kind of cohort of people where it's like they love that. They can it's palpable. You can
mhm,
feel the impact you make on a
mhm.
daily basis. If you can show that, thread that needle as the company scales and show, hey, this is how I know it can feel like we're this large, complex organization, 200 people, but this is how your impact, like how your work impacts the whole organization at large. How inspiring is that? How
Yeah,
motivating is that?
yeah.
You
It's
know?
like, have you ever seen, oh my gosh, there's a book about gung ho. It's a little short read, but it was a good book, and it talked about a gentleman that was brought in and to be the new CEO of a company, and it was a manufacturing plant, and it was in a small town, and basically the town was kind of suffering, and the factory was suffering, and they brought him in, and they wanted to revamp the business, it would also revitalize the community, and the first day he shows up, and the investors and the board have plans for him, and all these meetings. The first thing he wants to do is close down that meeting, and he goes down to the factory, and he goes to what is one of the entry level jobs and one of the lower paying jobs in that business, and that's where he spends the entire day. And I always thought that was really I loved that, but I read that book when I was a property manager, and one of the things they said is that, and I related it back to property management, is nobody wants to come back, like in a groundskeeper's position, right? Nobody wants to come to work every day and think all I do is pick up trash. Because first off, that's not all they do. But there's a connotation that can come with that. So understanding I'm actually the president of grounds is a whole different mindset.
Yeah.
And everybody at the end of the day wants to feel proud about what they do. And
Yeah.
I think what you're saying is we got to stay focused on that, because no matter what you do in any role out there, whatever the company is, whether it's tech or property management, how can we help empower people to feel the best at what they do, and then understand what their career goals are, so that what's next for them, we help them get there. But I remember it was the funniest thing we had, and this is a property management story, but we had one of our groundskeepers. His name was Oswaldo. I loved Oswaldo. He had the best smile. Every resident complimented. The man smiled all the time.
Awesome name, too.
It was an awesome name. But Oswaldo really embraced this president of grounds.
Yeah.
And when he understood the budget and what we were trying to do with NOI, and we were short, we weren't making our numbers just in the recession, and he took such pride in helping us with trash fines. I'll never forget it, because he would come in with sticky notes and he would pin up that he just generated another $50
Yeah.
towards the NOI, to our effective gross income, and to our budget.
That's awesome.
It was awesome. He was so cool. But it was something that simple about this correlating it to the big picture.
Yeah.
And I think sometimes as we are moving so fast, we can get away with that. But that would be an advice I would have is get people involved. Like we got away from it and then we got back to it. We're really transparent with our team members, our stand-ups. We are going through our numbers.
Yep.
Like we don't hide anything from them. They know where we're short. They know where we're missing. We know where we're, if where we're excelling. And then even when we're excelling, we also are really transparent about how that doesn't mean that it's all just, we
All
have money.
sunshine and
Well,
roses.
now,
Yeah.
now we're all profitable. We all get to sit back and not do anything.
Yeah.
No. And there's bigger challenges
Yep.
ahead. So now I'm glad we dove into that part of the conversation because, we may have had ideas,
Yeah.
but we didn't execute them by ourselves. And there's a lot of people that came along that journey with both of us. And
Totally. And I think like if I'm wrapping up the entrepreneurial journey, it takes a village. It does. It's not
oh my gosh.
it's we and it's we throughout various cycles of a startup's process, right? Sometimes it's the early people, some of them scale, some some of them don't. Every single person who touched Funnel, mission critical to the success and instrumental in the success of that
Yep.
business.
It's so funny you just said those words. Literally at probably 12:30 this afternoon, I was talking to Charles Stroud. Shout out to Charles Stroud. And I literally said, yeah, it took a village to raise Resman.
Yeah, it's true. It's true.
Funny.
It's true.
So,
I was talking to our fifth hire, first customer success hire, adore her. Shout out to Lindsay. And we were just talking about early days. And I said to her, it takes a village. And she goes, it certainly does. It's true.
yeah. No, I thank you so much for sharing, your journeys. And we've mentioned several times that you're now on a new adventure. And so a lot of
Oh,
those lessons learned, right, that you're not going to be able to apply. So talk to us about Moved because we haven't really dove into that. And,
Oh my gosh, yeah.
and I said we'd come back to it. So what's your role like there today? And, what's the experience?
Yeah. Oh my gosh, I love talking about this because I love this company and this team so much. So I guess I'll start by just saying what Moved is. So Moved is software for the multifamily industry to help operators automate new resident onboarding, right? So moment after a deal is done, a lease is signed, how do you introduce someone and deliver a really, really great first impression and that first touch experience? So that's why the company exists. What I do is my role as president, but really the job is to help introduce this product and this company to the multifamily industry.
Yeah.
Right. How I got there, I've known Adam, the founder, for years. He and I were good friends. He was part of my kind of founder vulnerability circle where he and I would open up to each other and just talk about what it was like to operate a business. And when I stepped out of the day-to-day of Funnel, he said, let me get your eyes on something for a second. We're bringing a new product to market. We've been pretty stealthy about it. I want you to see it. And I took one look at it and I was like, oh my God, this is incredible. This is like a new category in multifamily and this product is fantastic. And I was like, okay, I got to figure out a way to get involved, right? And we talk about the date before, kind of date before you get married theme here. I initially started advising, consulting. I invested in the business. And then I said, you know what? I can't stop thinking about this business. And it was funny because one of my mentors, he's known me forever. He picked up the phone. We were on a group call with Adam, hang up, and picks up the phone and calls me. And he said, I've known you a long time and it's good to see you so excited again. You should pay attention to that. So I did. And I joined full time.
Oh, awesome.
Yeah.
So how would you characterize where are they in their journey?
Oh, so yeah. So Moved is bringing me back to the early stage again. So when I started advising last year, the company was just shy of 15 people.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
We're now 25 people. So going in the right direction, nearly doubling. But it's that magical stage, right? Where it's like the team is just coming together, found product market fit, and everything's just starting to click.
Yeah.
So that's, it's just a magical time when you're in that 15, 30 person range. It's a fun crew.
So this makes me wonder because, this is deja vu, right? And it brings you back to the magical time, but the magical time is not always magical.
Oh, for sure.
So it makes me wonder, has an opportunity presented itself so far where you're able to lean in and go, that's that's a great idea. Something we might want to consider because of your experiences in the past that you've been able to bring to the table now.
Oh yeah, multiple times that's come up. And like sometimes it's external, right? Where I'm having a conversation
Mm.
with someone and I can share, hey, I've seen this before. Sometimes it's a reaction I'm having. And like internally, I have
Mm.
to kind of talk to myself and say, okay, like you've seen this before. You've done this before. Like, you know what's on the other side of that hill and, you know, act accordingly, like do better, or
Mhm.
you've learned that lesson. Don't go down the same path. Right. So that's been really helpful too. I will say, like, there's some areas where, because of those lessons, things are incrementally easier. I'm not going to say it's a lot easier the second time around, but incrementally easier. And then there are other things where it's like, oh man, like I still need to do work, like the burning the candle at both ends.
Mhm.
I love what I'm doing. So it's very easy to get absorbed
Yeah.
in work.
You don't know you're burning at both ends. That's where I think you're
Yeah.
saying that's where we have this issue
Yeah. Yeah. So it's like bringing that passion, that
because you do love it.
enthusiasm. I do love it. And I'm going to be thinking about it all the time, but I shouldn't be thinking about it all the time. Like when I'm at dinner with my family, my loved ones, like there's a time to turn it off. And it's funny, I was just having a conversation with a friend of mine yesterday about
Mhm.
this. And I brought up that thing. Like, I remember the events I missed. I don't remember why I missed them. So I think it's almost like just reminding myself of that and
Mhm.
like creating a pause to say, okay, are you doing that thing you do? Are you doing that thing where you're burning the candle at both ends and you don't realize it and you need to like stop
Mm.
and prioritize something else, namely yourself?
Mm.
So I think it's just those micro moments, giving myself a little bit of a pause
You know what
to,
else may be helpful? Because
yeah,
I've been thinking about it since we talked about it earlier in our
yeah,
conversation. Is what could we do different? Because I struggled with it myself. Um, maybe it's giving our loved ones permission to stop us to say enough's enough. I need the time.
yeah,
Like you need the time. I need the time for myself, which that's a whole nother story. But maybe looking back, I was like, I know I have this issue and I get really absorbed in things I'm passionate about. It doesn't mean that I don't intend, it's not intentional to take time away from you, but that is the end result.
yeah.
So maybe it's, I'm giving you permission to stop me and shake me when it's necessary. Like I don't want you to hold back. Your needs are important too. And I'm going to try and challenge myself to be better, but I'm human and I have a lot of bad habits.
I think that's a really good point.
Because I'm thinking about it for myself. I'm still trying to work through.
And I'm going to take that advice and I'm going to use it probably later when I get home or over the
Mhm.
weekend because I think it's so important to say, you know what, I know how I am. I know I have this pattern of
Mhm.
behavior. I want to do better. I want to be better. Call out the thing when you see that pattern. Say, hey, you're doing the thing,
Mhm.
and be open and vocal about it,
Yep.
and that's okay. I give you permission to do that. I want that. I like that idea.
I know,
Founders, spouses of founders, family members of founders, listen up.
Yep.
Call us out.
Yep. We need it. We do need it.
Yeah.
So in thinking about, when in your other company, when you brought that to market and now helping with your current, role and with Moved, is it a different, how different is it? Because the environment's different,
Yeah.
right? And would you consider this a greenfield opportunity too, because of the nature of the product and how does that play in?
Yeah. So I very much feel that. I feel that Moved is a category creator.
Mhm.
It's creating a new category in multifamily, right? This idea of multifamily onboarding doesn't exist. Whereas my last company was playing in, prospect experience, CRM solutions. These are things that have existed.
Mhm.
And there's pros and cons, right? With Funnel, building something best in class, but something where you already have existing budget, you already have education around why a CRM is important.
Mhm.
Very different than, with Moved. Moved is not a rip and replace. This is greenfield. It's creating a new category and paving the way. Others will follow, but it's still early on. The
Mhm.
space itself is far from maturation. So it's a lot of education.
Mm.
It's creating budget, right? So different challenges. And the other thing too, I'll say, is the market's different, right?
Mhm.
So like when I was starting Funnel with Mike, we were, well, one, he was coding and I was trying to go around trying to get operators to especially operators in New York, where they were like, don't tell me how to run my business.
Yeah.
Trying to introduce the idea that technology is important and technology could help
Oh,
smooth out some of these rough edges.
12 years ago?
12 years ago.
Yeah, that was a whole different ballgame.
But that was the battle, finding
Yeah.
the people, the early adopters who believe that to be true. We had to kind of suss those people out. And when I tell you, even on the investing side, I got told no more than I got yes. That's more than I was told yes. That was true on the customer side too, early days.
Oh, yeah.
So now PropTech is at a level of maturation where a lot of early stage PropTech companies aren't just battling with the company that might do something similar to what they do.
Mhm.
They're battling for mind share with
Mhm.
all the other vendors, all the other technology partners in the space. So it's it's different in that regard.
Mhm. Do you feel like you're still searching to find like what's your biggest hurdle you want to overcome right now? Like
Oof.
what would be the biggest win for you right now?
Well, we are
Other than sales, which is obvious.
that's that's the given, right? So let's take that out of the equation right now. We are in the process of bringing to ground some new team members. We have some
Mhm.
really important profiles that or folks that we're bringing to ground. Getting those folks trained up, ramped up. I'm very invested in bringing kind of stacking the deck in our favor and bringing what I hope and what I think will be the best team,
Mhm.
one of the best teams in multifamily. So bringing those to ground, making sure that those
Mhm.
folks ramp up and they have what they need. I don't know if that's necessarily what's keeping me up at night, but everything, it starts and ends with your team. So making
Mhm.
sure that we get the right people in the boat, they're in the
Mhm.
right seat, and they're ramped up and ready to go. And that's a project that I've been laser focused on for the past couple months.
Yeah. Yes. So this might be a question you can't answer, but does that mean because you're stacking? Well, I know you have to pay for talent, and you should. We did not pay what we should have for talent in the early days. Our budgeting, our mindset around it wasn't right. Not for, unfortunately, coming out of property management, that was part of the problem.
Yeah.
Is where we thought salaries and stuff should be were so dramatically different in the technology space.
Yeah.
And so we made some mistakes there. But now, I mean, are you at the point of fundraising? Do you anticipate to do that again, or have you maybe already done some of that? And has it been different than the first time?
Yeah. Well, it's a different experience, right? Because I am coming in to something that is existing
Mhm.
versus creating something with a co-founder myself, right? I'm
Right.
not the founder of this company. I'm early, right? And I
Mhm.
work closely with the founder of this company. So it's a different shift there. The company, similar to my last company, is a venture-backed company. In fact, we share a lot of investors in common. That's how Adam and I first met.
Okay.
So it's a well-funded venture-backed company. So similar profile in that way.
Mhm.
Um, but yeah, from a talent perspective, to touch on that, I mean, there are two things that I look at in that regard. So one is, and this might be getting too far into the weeds, so bear with me, but I look at what the data says. When I
Mhm.
make an offer to someone, I look at comp data, and there's a tool actually that I should tell you about because it's awesome. It's used by like 3,000 early stage technology companies, and you have to give to get.
Mhm.
So it's all comp data on various size of businesses, stage of businesses, and roles. So I look at what the data tells me. And then I also have an open and honest conversation with the candidate around this is what the data says. The second thing I look at is what is going to make you feel good. What is going to make you feel like what you're being compensated, both on a cash and on an equity basis, is commensurate with your value. And that's
Mm.
fuzzier, but I want to understand that. And I
Mhm.
look at both.
Mm.
And
Great question.
yeah,
Great question. That's why we have a very talented head of marketing at Roseman and Taylor. She asks people, and I love this question: "What is your joy?" She makes that part of her interview, and I love that. All of her team members, she goes, I need to understand what is your joy? What makes you joyful?" Yeah.
I think that's awesome. And I think understanding what makes people motivated, what makes them happy, what brings them joy, it's how you keep really talented people.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
So, and I was going to say, so in bringing that to market, what do you think is the challenge with customer removed? What challenge do they have to overcome? Because I looked at it.
Yeah.
And we're not making commercials here because we don't talk about products. So it's not necessarily about that. But going through that process, I'm like, ugh, like the idea of moving again, just ugh.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
And so understanding what your products do, I'm like, if I was in property management, I'd be excited about it.
Yeah.
And so I wonder what is it because is it a challenge when you're coming to market with something that's new, and there's not necessarily a space for it because it's unbudgeted? Like maybe from a concept perspective, we can talk about it.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, so I think it's like one of the things that excites me so much
Hmm.
about this company is also where some of the work lies, right?
Hmm.
So it's like the idea of creating a new category is really exciting and it has a lot there's a lot of opportunity there, but you're also, I don't want to say educating, but you're trying to introduce something new. And when you're trying to introduce something new, it's exactly what you said. You're trying to create budget, you're trying to explain the why, and you're trying to explain the why now,
Hmm.
right? So
Great point.
that's that's where a lot of the work is, and frankly, I mean, it's exciting work, which is why I'm here, and I feel like I'm well equipped to do it with especially with the team we have in place. But yeah, you're creating something from nothing, something that doesn't exist. So from a comp perspective, or from something that rip and replace, it's not there.
Mm.
It will be, I think, if we do our jobs well, we will introduce a new category into multifamily, which is insanely exciting. But blood, sweat, and tears to get there, just like there was with my first go around when, you're trying to chip away at something. But I think it's letting folks know, hey, the way you're doing things now,
Hmm.
like let me paint that picture on what that does by way of
Hmm.
time loss, inefficiency, money spent. It's inefficient money that you're spending. Let me show you a picture of a brighter tomorrow and what that can look like. And I think getting that word out there around efficiency and how to specialize the folks you have on site,
Hmm.
how to improve ideally that tenure, right? Because they're happier versions of themselves. They're
Well,
doing the things they want
you
they
know
love
what
to
they
do.
say. I'm sure you know this. I'm not telling you anything. I just want to say it.
Can
I'm
we
sure
say
you.
it at the same time? Is it
Well, I don't know. You'll have to see if you feel the urge too. But the renewal process starts
Oh
at move-in.
yeah, 100%. 100%.
100%. And
And
I
there's
know that to be true as it is true as it is true. And it's one of those things we tend to forget. And it's ironic because my kids have moved into apartments, and I can tell you, I'm just saying, multifamily. I think some of y'all have forgotten.
It does, and there's data, not turning out with you guys on data, but there's data that backs that up, where it talks about folks who are
Hmm.
satisfied when they move in, at move-in, they stay that way at renewal. Conversely, much more difficult to get satisfied if you're not right out of the gate. It's the first impression you make. So
Yep.
I would argue it's um, transforming the most important touch point, and it's one that today is causing a lot of pain, both for consumers, like what you mentioned, right?
Hmm.
As well as, on site uh, and the larger sort of multifamily landscape. So I'm excited.
Well, I can tell you they are very fortunate to have had you join the company because not only do you have you have a ton of experience that I know they will benefit from, and they will learn through some of your growing pains and sweat and sweat equity that you've already put into this process before. But I also know you genuinely care, and you are genuinely a good person.
Well, thank you. You were biased at this point, my friend, but thank you very much. I feel the same way about you.
Yeah, but I have a high bar. I'm biased, but
That's true.
I
That's
do have a
true.
high
And vice
bar.
versa. That's
Yeah,
true.
but I think at the end of the day, there is so much value in that, and sometimes it gets lost. There is people that are genuine. It shows up in the products. It shows up in the process, and
Mhm.
that's where good company culture can really come from. So I'm just disappointed that we couldn't get her and have known that we had this opportunity to steal her in some form or fashion. So y'all better count your lucky stars. But you're a great asset. I know that you guys will do great things, and I look forward to anything I can do to help with that because it's if you're involved, it's a good thing. So I think my last question for
Yeah.
you to wrap up our time together is if you could go back in your professional career
Mm.
and talk to younger you, what advice would you give yourself?
Oof, it's a good one.
I know.
This is a really good one. Trust your instincts. Is one. Um, and two, like this too shall pass. There were
Mm.
times, going back to what I said to you earlier, I remember the things I missed. I don't remember why I missed them. Um, I just trust yourself
Mhm.
and know that like the roller coaster ride is normal, and like just embrace it. Embrace the roller coaster. It's okay.
Put your seatbelt on.
Put your seatbelt on
Put
and
your
embrace it.
seatbelt. I'm gonna wait. It's a visual. Put your seatbelt on. Put your hands in the air.
Woo!
That's how you end a podcast.
That's right. That's right.
All right, guys. Well, we hope you enjoyed this episode and that you'll join us again next time. Be sure to subscribe to our Prop Talk podcast on Apple and Spotify or wherever you get your podcasts. And to learn more about Resman Property Management's platform and to get more insight on the multifamily ecosystem, please visit us at myresman.com. Thanks, guys. Have a great day.